What is going on, everybody? I am extremely excited to welcome in the series of me interviewing friends, colleagues, coworkers, former coworkers, people I have done terrible, terrible tech things with. I am excited to welcome Erin to the party. Erin, what's up? Welcome.
Hello, I have never done a YouTube video, so this
Yeah,
is I'm
I can't promise you fame or fortune, but what are you gonna do?
I'm
Maybe
not
we'll help.
asking for either of those, so
Yeah, exactly.
it's okay.
Uh, Erin and I work together, and although I don't think I have to say this disclaimer right now. We're not speaking for HashiCorp in any way. These are our opinions only, et cetera, et cetera. These type of things are, I think, unnecessary, but I'm saying it anyway. Um, yeah, Erin, what do you do right now? Like, what's your role, and what kind of stuff are you working on?
So right now, I have been at HashiCorp for almost 3 years. I don't know how that's possible, but it is. And I've worked with Dave for almost that whole time. There's been a few months that I did not work with you. And yeah, we've just been automating a bunch of stuff, cleaning up a bunch of Packer code, uh, upgrading servers, making sure Terraform Cloud is actually operating. A lot of the work that we did was around dashboards and monitoring. And I mean, there's just been a bunch that we've been doing, and this has been my favorite role that I've had so far in my career.
Yeah, it's cool. I think, so many of the projects I've seen you kind of like pick up and work on are like they're so they're kind of like what people are learning. That like that's the story of like DevOps and SRE. So for anyone wondering, Erin's title is SRE, senior SRE on the Terraform Cloud team. The crazy thing is like the variety of stuff that you touch every day, like from I think literally, I'm not exaggerating. On one day, I have seen you write like a Docker file, work with a Circle CI config, dig around in Terraform code, mess with some configs in Puppet, um, go and like write or edit a Go program that hits the Amazon API. Am I missing anything? It's like in one day, I've seen you do all of those things, which is like that's like someone's entire DevOps like study list, basically. Um,
Yeah, it
yeah,
seems wild to have all of that in our brains, and yet we're still able to do all of the things that we need to.
yeah. Speak for yourself. I Google a lot.
So do I.
Yeah, no, it's cool, but it's like I think it's a great way to like try to stay current and try to stay sharp. I know one thing I hear from a lot of people is they'll kind of get into a role where they're maybe even at a larger company, they're more specialized and they end up touching very little. Like they'll be like a DevOps engineer or some one of these DevOpsy roles. Um, but they'll kind of get siloed on just one or two things. So they'll be like the Puppet person or the I don't know, like the Terraform guy or the like Ruby instrumentation Datadog girl or whatever.
Mhm.
And I feel like one of the nice things is that we don't have that. We have so much infrastructure to take care of, and greenfield projects and legacy projects that it's just like a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Yep. Because at Raytheon, we had people that were like, there was the Jenkins team, and all they did was operate Jenkins. And I just can't imagine doing that
Yeah.
24/7. That would
No.
not.
Yeah, it depends on your personality type too. I think that's actually an interesting point. Is like I think people don't ask themselves enough what kind of company they want to work for, because that makes a huge difference in terms of what you're doing in your day to day. Like if you like a routine and you like your little world of tech, that you're like, you can learn it super well and always know the answer and be really in control of, maybe a larger engineering company like that is a good fit, because like you know what to expect every single day. If you're on the Jenkins team, you're dealing with Jenkins problems, you're dealing with CI, you're dealing with builds, and that is where your little world ends. Whereas when you're at a smaller company or an earlier stage company like a startup, you're just much more likely to be working on a lot of different stuff. For some people like us, I think we thrive under that environment, but I think some people would just have like a panic attack after a month and just be like, this is too much. I can't be good at all of this.
And I mean, that's totally
And there's
reasonable to,
nothing wrong with that.
yeah, because yeah, either you can wear a bunch of hats or you just can wear one hat, but like either way, it's okay. But that's a good point to make.
Yeah, being conscious about kind of choosing what environment you're going into can make a huge, I think, difference on working environment. Um, how long have you been in tech? Just kind of like going back, did you get into this right after school?
Um, well, so I've been into a bunch of weird jobs before I got into tech. So I did social media marketing. I took pictures of jewelry and I sold a bunch of jewelry. That was when I was in college. And then I worked as an office manager's assistant for a while, where I put on like social events for employees at this one company that I worked for. And we would make sure like everybody had snacks. Like it was a very not a job that was
So
super
exactly like what you do now, basically.
no. So I got into tech. I became a technology apprentice. That was my first job at Barclays. And I didn't know hardly anything about anything at that point. And I got onto a DevOps team and they were using Chef to provision a bunch of servers. And this man who worked there kind of took me under his wing as his mentor, and I became his mentee. And he taught me just how all of this stuff worked and how Chef actually worked. And then I started provisioning servers, and I was like, this is interesting. Like I had no idea this is how any of this worked.
Yeah. When you started that, did you have had you studied like a tech, did you have like a tech degree of some kind, or did you have any certifications? Like what, how did you kind of get that first job?
So my degree was in management information systems. So we had some courses that were very old, like database SQL stuff, which I don't remember any of that because it was just awful. And then there was Visual Basic stuff that we were doing. And I also don't remember any of that because it was also awful.
You track the IP address in Visual Basic, I
I
believe.
don't even remember
That's
what
the
we
quote. It's like one of those memes. It's like from some CSI show. I
did.
tracked the IP address using Visual Basic.
I honestly don't even remember what we did because it was so bad.
That's fair. Yeah.
So we had like very old school stuff that we were learning, and I kind of was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do with any of this knowledge because it's so old. Like nobody's even using this.
Wow. Cue the hate comments from the Visual Basic programmers in the comments below. Thanks, Erin.
That was my impression at the time.
No, that's fair. I mean, that's like it's a pretty antiquated way of like teaching programming. Well, it depends. Yeah, Visual Basic, you can actually. It depends on what you're doing. Yeah, it would
Those,
not be my first choice for a language, probably.
yeah, those courses were so basic too that it was like I wasn't going to be able to get a career doing anything off of that, anyways.
Mhm. Yeah,
So yeah, when I graduated, I didn't really know anything. And it was like I had to learn everything from scratch, which that's fine.
interesting. And what made you kind of like decide to get into it? Like, why were you like, okay, this like DevOps role like feels like it might be a cool thing to do?
I just was trying to find something that I was passionate about. And when I started learning Chef and actually using it and creating environments and like actually seeing what could be accomplished with it, I was like, this, like, I would spend my free time doing this because it was fun.
Yeah.
So I would go home from work and just keep working. And I worked like constantly because I enjoyed it. And I was like, well, this is actually something that I can do and be happy, and I'll wake up and like want to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. That is like a, yeah, I mean that feeling to me, it's like if that's why I'm in tech is like, I mean, you know me, I go on vacation for like 2 weeks and then I'm like, it's like, Dave, what did you do on vacation? Oh, I wrote some Terraform. It's like, Dave, that's what you do at work. Like, yeah, right. Don't tell them that I would do this for free.
I mean, I've spent some weekends spinning up Terraforms.
Yeah, for what it's worth, and I say this every time I talk to someone about this, like passion and interest is good, but like I think one thing that's good is as our industry matures, it's not expected of anyone to be like always working weekends and stuff. And if you work for a company that expects that, like that's a problem. So it's like if you do that for fun, that's great, but no one should ever expect you to do that. Just saying.
Yeah, there's definitely, you need to step away from the computer. Like, please be a healthy human and don't constantly be Terraforming.
Yeah. don't. We should make a t-shirt. ABT, always be terraforming. What you kind of answer the second half of this, but what made you switch to that first tech role? Like you were kind of like doing this events coordination stuff. What made you be like, this is a job ad I'm going to apply to, even though I haven't done this before?
Well, so I had moved from Austin to Dallas and I was living with my parents because I had just graduated from school and I was working at Pier 1 as a sales associate and it was miserable because customers are just terrible in retail.
Yeah.
So I was just looking at jobs that were out there and I saw that technology apprentice role and I was like, well, this is like a starting job. If I hate it, it won't matter because I can just find something else.
Yeah.
And I possibly could actually enjoy doing what I'm doing there. So I applied for it. They hired about 25 of us. So there was a big group of these apprentices. And it was kind of nice because it was like we all were in the same boat where we didn't know what we were doing. And it was fun.
That sounds amazing. It sounds like such a great program. I think that's one of the problems is so many jobs. It's like, it feels sometimes like, and I hear this from people a lot, is like you're scrolling through Indeed or whatever, and it feels like every single tech job is like requires a bachelor's and 2 years of experience, and it's like, I think a lot of companies just don't have great kind of on ramps for people who are just getting into tech, even though they're, you can always hear them complain like, oh, it's so hard to find and hire tech people. Well, it's like if you try growing some of them at your company, like you might have more luck than trying to just pick off senior ones that are already working somewhere. So yeah, I would encourage if you're at a company or whatever and you have some influence on this, like hire junior people. Like they will be loyal to you. They will learn things your way. Like it's such a good thing to do. And it's also really healthy to have in a team. I think not just senior people. I mean, this is something that I've seen at several companies. It's like it can get pretty stale if it's all senior people. And often you don't get better results with 5 senior people and 0 more junior people. A mixed group is usually, it just really works the best. um cool.
Because honestly, I don't know how I would have gone into this field if that job didn't exist, because I would have had no understanding of how to even get a beginning job.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people it's also like you don't even know what's out there in tech. You just don't have a good idea of what the different jobs are and what they do and what you might be interested in. Then it's like you got to just kind of jump in to figure that stuff out.
Yeah.
um I guess that relates to this question. If you were starting over from zero today, kind of knowing what you know, not technically, but about the industry, what you know today, what would your kind of moves be? Like, what would you learn? What would you kind of like target as your first job? Like, kind of walk me through your thinking.
I mean, it's hard to answer that question because I had no plans. Like, it was just
Yeah.
kind of like I just did what felt right. And that's how I kind of do a lot of things in life is like, okay, this is what feels right at the time. I mean, I wish I would have had more knowledge that I have now of how everything works, but at the same time, I wouldn't have known what I needed to know. So I guess it's more just like having the openness to want to learn and then going out there and actually motivating yourself to learn those things that you need to know at the time. And that's constant even now. There's things that we need to learn and we go and learn them. And then, that's just the nature of this job. So
That's a great point. Yeah, is that the technology has definitely changed. Like what I'm working on now, it's very different from what I was working on 10 years ago, but that is the constant is this job or any job in a sort of tech career is going to be like you learning by yourself essentially or with one other person is a huge part of it. It's like, oh, like you got stuck on a problem, like pairing with somebody like deep in some code base, like guess what, you're Googling together. Like that's like quickly learning, finding information, teaching yourself, trying things, thinking of ways to test something or to test a theory. Like that's the bread and butter of doing this more than like learning Kubernetes or becoming like a bash wizard. It's you'd focus on learning, just put yourself out there, see what comes your way, apply to some stuff, and then just like double down on whatever you get, learn it really well and go from there.
yeah, and be okay with like things not being perfect because like it's okay to break things and you should break things and that that don't be perfect at everything. Like you have to learn, and by learning, you have to break things and grow. So
It's great advice. However, if you touch production, do it with someone else watching.
yes, please have a environment that is not production, so you can break it
Erin, I
safely.
think you just told everyone to go break production. I'm pretty sure that's what you just said.
That is not
Um,
what I said.
um, yeah, no, I think that's amazing advice. Yeah. You've already kind of touched on this, but what are the things specifically that you find the most interesting about the work that you're doing now, or just the work that you have done in this industry? What are some of the things you like the most about that?
I mean, I think we kind of talked about it, but just how everything is always changing and there's never a constant. And I like that because I enjoyed school because I was always learning new things. And I was kind of competitive, I guess, in school because I always wanted to know everything.
Well, huh.
And that's also what I like about this. I don't like having to know everything, but just knowing that I have everything out there that I can learn. And there's so many different things that I can learn. I enjoy that because that's just my nature, I guess, of just always wanting to know more.
Yeah, that's cool. That definitely feels like the world we live in every day of just like, yeah, you never know everything. So if that's important to you, your ego is going to get pretty hurt in this, because even once you've been doing it for a long time, it's not unusual for Erin and me to sit in a meeting where someone very senior basically has to admit that they know less than a junior person, and that's okay. Like no one's judging anybody for that. That's like a very healthy thing, because there's a billion different topics in tech to know, and you can't know them all better than somebody else. So it's just your learning is going to be uneven. You're going to be matched up with a bunch of other people whose learning is kind of uneven, and then it's not one of those things where the most experienced person is always right, which is
Yep.
cool.
And then it's also just the outcome of what we build and seeing like, hey, like all of this stuff that we're building is making this application run. And that's freaking cool.
Yeah,
So it's just fun to see the outcome too of all of it.
yeah, for sure. Which kind of parts of the industry or niches in tech have you worked in, and what are those? What were those like? Just what was it like to work in the different places you've been?
I've been in like the DevOps SRE realm the whole time I've been working. So just like the automation, like using Chef, Puppet to provision servers, and then Packer to build AMIs, and Terraform to provision the servers themselves. And I mean, it's just, again, like I said previously, to see the outcome of those tools working together to create this bigger thing. I
Yeah,
love it.
it's pretty rad. Um, Now um, you've worked at a couple. I'm not gonna be hyper specific, but you've worked at very large companies before, like an engineering firm, a bank, like those types of places. How are those places different from like a pure tech company like we're in now? What's the environment like?
Just the culture is completely different. People at like the bank are wearing suits every day coming in, like they look all professional and and
Well,
then here, I mean at HashiCorp, like we're just very casual, like we're remote too, which is completely different. At the previous companies, we were all physically there together working. And at one of the places I worked, I literally would have people lined up by my desk to ask me questions.
no pressure.
No. So it was like, yeah, the environments and the culture are always going to be different at every company you go to.
Yeah, makes sense. Do you prefer, what's your like ideal culture or environment? Like, what are the things that are really important to you?
I mean, at some of the places I've been, been intense. Like they want you working a specific number of hours and like lots of pressure. And that's just not healthy or sustainable for people that work in our field, because we have to have fresh brains to actually do the work that we need to do. And so having an environment that's like healthy, like work the hours you need to get done what you need to get done, that's really very important. And then just being able to learn and grow. is also really important.
It must be something like some creative aspect of our work that makes this a requirement, but like you can't, yeah, you grinding is not really an option in this. Like often, like I've noticed this, if I'm like really grinding on a problem, more time doesn't necessarily help. It helps to step away when you really hit a wall and for like 2 hours you haven't made progress. It's like that's when you got to step away, get a fresh, like you said, get kind of a fresh brain, go do something else. Like your subconscious will keep cranking on the problem. You'll come up with some ideas. um but I almost feel like it's like you can't tell an artist to like sit. I'm not saying this is an art, like get off my back, bro. I'm just saying I'm saying like there's some creative juice it just isn't on tap all the time. Like you can run out of it. And if you're in a work culture environment that doesn't see it that way at all, where you're just like churning out code widgets, that's just going to be a problem. You're not going to do well. You're not going to do good work in that kind of environment. So having a company culture that understands that it's like hard creative work, it can happen at weird hours of the day, and it's not always like 8 to 5, butts and seats. For me, that's really helpful to have an environment that or company culture that kind of respects that and yeah, supports that kind of like who calls it this hammock programming, the closure guy.
Yeah.
um he's basically like when you're like really stuck on something, it's like he basically like lies in his hammock and like drinks a beer and like then comes back the next day and voila, like the problem's solved. Like he knows what to do next. um that explains where I go in the afternoons, by the way.
Well, no, like sometimes I'll need to step away from the computer because I've had been looking at something for so long and I can't figure it out. I'll step away, go for a walk or something, and then while I'm walking, I'm like, oh wait, I think that would work, and then it does when I get back. So
It is so common. Yes, I've had that experience so many times. It's just,
yeah, and
yeah,
it's not like I'm even consciously trying to think of it. I just randomly will be like, oh yeah, huh, that idea just came to me, and I think it will work.
yeah. No, you're totally right. Um, for all those people watching who are voracious readers, yes, this is that whole Daniel Kahneman thing where it's like diffuse versus focused thinking, probably switching between the modes. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know how to explain it except in practical terms, it is exactly what Erin just described. Um,
I don't know anything about the person you just spoke
I just
of.
made all those words up. I'm just trying to sound smart to impress
It
my viewers.
sounded smart.
Yeah. Yes. What are some things that really surprised you or were different about the tech world when you got into it, when you kind of switched to tech from doing non-tech stuff?
Everything. So, when I was at Barclays as that apprentice, the team that I was on was brand new. So DevOps was like a huge deal for them at that point, and they were like, this is going to be our focus for the company to make, because they had pretty poor practices before this. And so I was in meetings with like these high level executives and like people that had been at Barclays for forever. And they were saying all these things that I didn't understand anything they were talking about because I didn't have any experience in this. So there's like tech terminology that made no sense. And then there's also all these acronyms that they had there that I didn't understand. So it was like this foreign language and just sitting there and being like, oh my God, I don't know anything that's happening. But once you sat there over days and like you heard it over and over again, you started to kind of pick it up. So it's kind of like a lot of these tech terms and stuff feels like a foreign language at first. And then once you've been immersed for long enough, you start to pick it all up. But
That's
I had
really,
no idea it was going to be like that.
yeah, that's really insightful. I think the fear of that feeling you're talking about keeps a lot of people from applying to jobs like for way too long. Like a lot of people have this feeling like, oh, before I ever apply to like even a Linux system engineer job or a support role or a like DevOps adjacent job, um, they want like all the certifications and they want like, well, I don't have a degree, is that going to hurt me? And I need some experience. What kind of massive project should I spend 3 months building in my basement? And I'm not against any of those things. I think experience is good. I think doing your own project is a great way to learn. But like if you're doing it right, you're gonna have that feeling like you were just talking about. It's gonna feel like you're just in the deep end suddenly, and there's just no way around it. There's no amount of preparation that can save you from feeling like a dum dum sitting in a room not understanding anything. Like that's a normal part of this, and you just got to get through it basically.
Yeah, you just have to know that it's okay.
Yeah,
And like you're not going to know everything these people are talking about, and that's fine. And you'll learn it eventually.
yeah,
And being okay, being uncomfortable, that's important.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important. I love it's something that you're calling out over and over again just while we're talking. I think it's so incredibly helpful to a lot of people because yeah, they have that kind of like squirrel stashing away, like like do I have enough knowledge in my knowledge pile? Like I don't even want to send out one application, that's going to take me 30 seconds to do before I'm like ready. It's like, well, you're never going to be ready, so you might as well just start sending them out now and start getting paid to learn. Like stop learning for free, get paid to learn.
Yep. Yeah, get paid to learn.
That's cool. What are some skills that you think new people neglect when they're planning on getting into tech or when they kind of show up as juniors? What are some skills that you wish more people had?
Probably just being more open and more just like willing to listen. Because I think a lot of people that go into tech, they're smart people, like extremely smart, but they lack kind of this ability to let other people kind of guide them and help them to begin with. So yeah, just listen to people, gain experience. Don't worry so much about having to be perfect and do everything right. Take feedback and criticism in a positive way. I know I don't like criticism and feedback all the time, but it has helped me grow a lot. And so being okay knowing that your work is going to have some feedback that's okay.
Huh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I definitely, I, to some extent, even now, like it's um, sometimes hard to accept criticism or whatever, but it's always good to try to learn from it. And what you said first, which is this kind of like feeling that you're right. A lot of junior people just have this like they're asking me the question and I don't have an answer. It's like they're back in the classroom and they're getting called on. It's like you don't have to have the answer. It's like the most common answer that we hear in meetings is like, oh, I'm not sure. Let me look at that. And then someone writes it down and goes and like digs into it later. No one's expecting you to know everything. A lot of the discussions that happen at like our work are just people wondering out loud, trying to get to the root of something or figure something out. And it's not, yeah, no one's getting put on the spot really. That's important to keep in mind. Yeah.
And I know like in meetings when I was more junior, I would just listen and I never really said a lot because it was more like, okay, I want to hear what people who have been doing this for a while are saying. So I understand their perspective. And then I would learn from that.
Yeah. And some of the most insightful comments and like just one of the most positive kind of like work relationships I was ever kind of in was I don't know, a newer DevOps engineer who had actually gotten pretty high up in another field and then kind of transferred over. And she was very comfortable not only kind of being wrong and saying that she didn't know how to do something or that she needed help, which was amazing because like, it's better to find that out at the beginning and then match someone up with a partner to work on something than having them just bash their head against a wall for 3 weeks, get burned out, and then not have a project done. Surprise. Um, and also just like her input was really valuable on the non-tech or architecture related stuff of like, I don't think these teams are working together well. It's like that often is a bigger issue than like, what is this interface that we're going to design? And like just having her feel confident and calling out some of that like non-technical stuff as she was coming up to speed on the technical was, I just thought it was great. It was such a good use of someone new to the team who's not used to all the skeletons yet and is like, why is this way? And you're like, oh my god, I don't know, it's terrible, you're right. um Yeah, I think that's super healthy. To kind of like part B of this question, are there any skills technically that you wish more people had, or that you wish kind of people came on board with? Are there any common like holes in people's basic tech knowledge that you kind of expect them to have?
Just the idea of testing things, and that's what people need to really have a strong feeling for. So, for example, like even when I don't know if this can be disclosed, but you might have to edit this out.
Yeah, I'll edit this out.
But like even at HashiCorp, like we didn't have testing for building our servers, and like that's not good. And that like we have to have a way to verify what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so having a good framework of testing, and then also having the framework of having like an environment in which to break all the stuff that you want to break, that's what people need to really think about a lot.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think that's the thing that always gets neglected. You know, when people are doing projects at home to learn or whatever, it's like you do everything in production because there is only production. But in real life, things don't, or at least shouldn't work that way. And yeah, being sure that when you do show up to a real company, a real job, a real product, that you're this is how you learn safely. It's through testing. It's through a staging environment or a test environment. It's like that's what makes it safe to learn and break stuff and do all this stuff we're talking about. You know, if there's only production, like you can't learn anything because you can't afford to do anything wrong, and you got to do a whole bunch of shit wrong before you learn anything. So um, huh. Yeah. Interesting. Testing. I was totally gonna say like, oh, like, you know, people should have a grasp of Bash, or should I don't know, something about programming or something. But I think that is a great, yeah, it's a it's a great concept. Yeah. Testing and always having it in mind.
Yeah, that's the concept that I have always tried to bring with me to every company I go to.
Yeah. What are I mean, we're in this, let me start over. We're in this kind of crazy DevOps, SRE, like web 3.0 world. I hope that's not a real term. Um, where, yeah, there's a lot of products out. There's a lot of like changes to process. Where do you think things are going in the future? Like, where's our slice of the industry moving to? And I mean, specifically, I know that's a really broad question. Interrupt me anytime if you have thoughts on this, but the type of thing I'm thinking about is like, you know, we used to have people just configuring things, like logging in, configuring a thing. Like now we have configuration code and we bake, you know, AMIs, or like configuration is automated and produces some kind of artifact that you know is always the same because of testing and verification, like you just mentioned. Um, or like developers are now, you know, essentially, instead of just editing a code base, it's like they use you know, something like Git. They use VCS to have changes that then correspond to like a Docker image that gets rebuilt for each change, so you have deterministic builds that way. You have things like Nomad, like Kubernetes, all this like cloud shit. Like where do you feel like things are going, like in a few years?
I mean, it's scary because it feels like we're moving away from like the basics of understanding like how a computer actually works, and we've made these tools to make it easier for us so we can do these other things, but the computers are doing a lot of the stuff for us, so like they're becoming smart. And I feel like they're going
Hang
to
on, let me
continue.
find my shotgun real quick. They're becoming smart.
And I feel like they're just going to continue. So like with like AI and stuff like that, like robots, and I mean that's the future, and computers will be doing these things on their own at some point, and humans will have even smaller interaction. I don't know. I think it could get weird.
Yeah, yeah,
Because like
yeah.
looking
No,
at a
that's true.
sysadmin's career like 20 years ago, it was completely different than now.
Yeah,
And I mean, our jobs didn't even exist when my grandparents were our age, so I
that
don't even
is exactly
know.
the point. Yeah, Yeah, no, it's true. I totally get the AI slash computers just becoming more and more unsupervised doing stuff is a thing. Like, yeah, robots are straight up already killing people. There was that thing in New York where that one of those dog robots went in and like killed a hostage taker, and then everyone was like, "Wait a second, did we just make a Terminator?"
I
Uh,
remember that.
like, whoops, like we're there. Yeah, it always felt like 20 years away, and like actually, it's right now. Um, and what was I think? Oh, you also reminded me of just the fact that our tooling is so complex. There's so many layers of stuff upon stuff that
Mhm.
have been built on to, like you were saying, the that like sysadmin logging in and like doing a bash script layer. Um, that often I feel like, yeah, like people who are operating the software tooling at the top layer have, it's like as soon as something breaks, you have to understand at least one layer below you. And that's where you get into trouble, right? Like I'm sure there's a lot of people who are great at running Kubernetes and understand the myriad like abstractions that it gives you and the complicated like how it does this and how it does that. Um, but who then can't actually troubleshoot when something breaks down there, it's like, oh, actually, I have no idea how like the container networking works and the networking rules and the routing rules between these things work, like how that actually maps onto the layers below it. And then you're like, during production, um, this is based on a horror story I heard from a friend recently. It's like if you're in production, you're just screwed and you're like calling my friend because he knows how like, net filter IP tables work. And like that's who has to fix your problem.
Yeah. Like if we're abstracting so much away from that and people are losing that knowledge, like what will happen when we don't have people that have that knowledge?
Yeah. I
Maybe.
once smoked a lot of weed and I tried to write a short story called Code Divers, and it was about people in like 200. I'm definitely editing this part out, by the way. It was about like people in like 100 years that are like code specialists that are like get paid shit tons of money to like work for some huge company and then like go dive down through all the layers of abstraction to like, they're like code archaeologists basically. They have to like
Yeah, see,
find
that's
out.
what I feel like will happen though. Like there will
It
be
feels
like
real,
code
but it feels more real
archaeologists.
here.
Yes. They're
Like
finding the fossils of old.
yes, it's like Steve's comment from like 2005. Like, look, 70 years ago, a guy was like, by the way, if this ever breaks, like you're screwed because it's like a really long regex or something. It does something magical. It's like, yeah, yeah, it feels like it.
Yeah,
I don't know. I
I
don't know,
think.
man. It's crazy.
Yeah, in 20 years, I don't know what our jobs will look like.
I know what mine's gonna look like. Sitting on the beach,
Sitting
drinking
on
my
the beach with
cocktail.
a pina colada.
Yeah, exactly. uh, yeah, no, but it's true. Yeah, you kind of can't. In a way, you're crazy if you're planning for the future. Like the only way to deal with it is to, like you're saying, just stay open, kind of keep your nose like in the air, be like sniffing out new opportunities and like see where the wind's blowing and just yeah, just be open and ready to kind of like take action on stuff even before you feel like you're ready. I think that's a
Yep,
really,
just adapting.
yeah, you got a good attitude, Erin. I really think you have a great attitude. I can see why you've gotten this far. It's like, yeah,
Well, that's why we got along because I think we have similar attitudes.
it's true. We're both our spirit animal is Crush from Finding Nemo, I believe. It's like, oh, dude, let's not have ourselves a little cry about this problem. We can solve this. Um, that's cool. Is there anything else that you like would say to someone who's, let's say, on the newer or sort of mid-career kind of path? Like, what it's hard without as being asked a specific question about this, but is there something that we haven't kind of talked about here that's important to you that you want people to know? Or
Um, just like be open and like just if you're not enjoying what you're doing, stop doing it and find something that you enjoy doing. Like there's no point in spending your life doing something you don't enjoy. And there's so many different things you can do in tech itself that, if you like tech, you're watching this video, then you probably want to be in this field. So yeah, just find that right path for yourself.
Great. I love it. Uh, Thank you, Erin, for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. You already have to look at this face enough during the week, and like appreciate you doing it in our free time as well.
It was fun. Thank you for inviting me to do it.
Yeah. Thanks again, Erin. This is great.
Yep, you're welcome, Dave.